system. Supposedly been implemented this month. Things are rolling out. We're going to hear about it soon. This is going to completely change the banking system, the financial system as we know it. And, you know, a lot of you guys that have heard Nassara is on its way. Going to pay off all debt, debt jubilee, mortgages, credit cards, student loans, all those types of things going to be wiped out. We're going through a renaissance. New times happening. Good things to come. Stay.
And I'll say this boldly. We're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new one, the new accounting, is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens. In my opinion, we're going to need a digital constitution of human rights if we're going to have digital money. But also, this new money will be sovereign in nature. Most people think that digital money is crypto and private, but what I see are superpowers introducing digital currency. The Chinese were the first. The U.S. is on the brink, I think, of moving in the same direction. The Europeans have committed to that.
Something happened that America did not see coming. Starting today, China and Indonesia have officially launched a new cross-border payment system called QFS, and not a single U.S. dollar will be used in it. This is not just a story about two countries making a deal. This is the latest link in a chain that has been building against the dollar for years. And today, I am going to show you exactly where that chain started, how far it has come, and what it means for America and the rest of the world. Let's go back to 2022. When America sanctioned Russia and froze $300 billion worth of Russia's central bank reserves in a single move, the entire world learned one lesson very clearly. Any country that uses the dollar is ultimately at the mercy of Washington. The dollar is not just a currency, it is a weapon. And when America fired that weapon at Russia, Russia was not the only one who took notice. More than 100 countries around the world were quietly asking themselves the same question. What if tomorrow they do this to us? That fear turned de-dollarization from a movement into a mission. Now let's talk about Brics. Brics now has 11 full members: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Indonesia. This bloc represents roughly 45% of the world's entire population. It controls more than 35% of global GDP measured by purchasing power parity. This is not a small group of angry nations venting frustration. This is a massive portion of the world moving together in one direction. And that direction is away from the dollar. Now let's get to the core of what this video is really about. mBridge. This is a cross-border payment platform built by the central banks of China, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, and Hong Kong working together. On this platform, there is no SWIFT. There is no dollar. There is no American approval needed for any transaction. And according to data compiled by the Atlantic Council, which is a Washington, D.C.-based research institution, not a Chinese one, this platform has already processed over 55.5 billion in transactions. More than 4,000 successful cross-border settlements. And here is the number that should make every American policymaker sit up straight. In 2022, when this platform first began, it processed just 22 million. Today, it has processed 55.5 billion. That is a 2,500-fold increase in just a few years. This is not growth. This is an explosion. So what did America do while all of this was happening? The BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, which is considered the central bank of all central banks, a globally neutral institution, quietly walked away from the mBridge project at the end of 2024. Their stated reason was that they did not want sanctioned countries like Russia and Iran to have access to the platform. The BIS general manager even went on record and said publicly, mBridge is not the Brics bridge. But ask yourself one question. Why did he feel the need to say that at all? That statement alone tells you exactly how nervous America and its allies had become. But here is what actually happened as a result. mBridge did not stop. It did not slow down. China and the UAE simply continued operating it independently, transactions kept growing, and America watched from a distance and could do absolutely nothing. Then came Trump's warning. Trump issued an open threat to Brics countries. If you try to replace the dollar, America will impose 100% tariffs on you. This was a direct threat. But Brazil's President Lula da Silva stood up at an emergency summit in September 2025 and said clearly that using tariffs as blackmail has been institutionalized as a tool to capture markets and interfere in the internal politics of other nations. When those words were spoken openly on a global stage, the world heard them. And Brics did not stop. Brics Pay was announced, and it is scheduled to fully launch at the New Delhi Brics Summit in September 2026, connecting Russia's SPFS, China's CIPS, India's UPI, and Brazil's PIX into one unified system. A complete functioning alternative to SWIFT, built by nations that America tried to threaten into submission. And while we are talking about SIPs, you need to hear this number. China's cross-border interbank payment system processed the equivalent of 245 trillion in yuan-denominated transactions in the year 2025 alone. 245 trillion. This infrastructure exists right now. It is real. It is operational. It means that if any country in the world wants to drop the dollar and settle trade in yuan instead, there is already a complete working system ready and waiting for them. America did not build a counter to this in time. And now it may be too late. Now let's talk about energy. Because the single biggest pillar of dollar power has always been the petrodollar. Since 1974, when America made its deal with Saudi Arabia, sell oil only in dollars, and we will protect you, the entire world had to hold dollars just to buy oil. It was a brilliant trap. But in March 2026, India purchased approximately 60 million barrels of Russian crude oil, and a significant portion of that transaction was settled in Chinese yuan and UAE dirhams. No dollars involved. Bloomberg reported this. This was not a small side deal. This was a massive energy transaction conducted completely outside the dollar system. And the petrodollar is cracking. And at the same time, Iran,
the old banking system is collapsing before your very eyes. Banks are shutting down, freezing withdrawals, and stealing from the people. That era is over. Right now, redemption centers are open, and they are officially accepting the Nazara Gazara gold coin.
to the central bank digital currency, to reject the fact that the governments and the banks can completely control your life. People have to see that. And we need to be careful that we don't publicly say too much about the safety net of the QFS, because what people do is they become lazy. They become complacent. They don't do anything.
Yeah.
People need to stand up for their rights and not just sit there.
Light is exposing the darkness. There are those out there who are, so say, truthers, journalists, bloggers, whatever you want to call it. Some are on point. They know what's going on. But I'm absolutely gobsmacked at the amount that haven't got a clue what's going on. This is a spiritual journey. And you have to be spiritually awake to see what's going on. Otherwise, you'll be living in fear. And there's plenty of them out there who are stoking up the fear, which makes it very clear who's on what side. This is a very, very important time in your life to choose between being part of the light or being on the other side, the dark side. If you're on the dark side, you've got nowhere to hide. We're coming after you. You're going to be exposed because the light always wins. God bless you.
These are the facts, not put out by mainstream media. If you want to know the truth, we put out the truth every single day, Monday to Friday. Saturdays and Sundays, we spend with our families, as we should do. So if you want to know the truth...
This phase of my life, I'm in therapy right now because I'm transitioning.
What did you say?
I walk with my husband, Michael, and hold hands. It's like a whole new world for me.
Husband, Michael and I also want to acknowledge... Michael and I also want to acknowledge your son, Jack, who's deployed today. All of you. Michael and I...
Or the first woman president.
We already have it with Obama, so let's just calm down.
Got it.
You know Michelle is a trans...
I'm sorry, she's a what?
A transgender. We all know.
Oh my gosh.
You know what my kids asked me? They said, you've got to ask the president, does anything scare him?
You know, well, when Michelle's mad, I get worried.
I wanted to talk, Marlon, a bit about, just so proud of how you are being a role model for dealing with a child that's transgender.
Absolutely.
And that's, that warms my heart, particularly as a black man. Would you care to share?
Or Big Bro are talking trans this week on their podcast, and she's all in for they, them.
Just so proud of how you are being a role model for dealing with a child that's transgender.
Absolutely.
And that's, that warms my heart, particularly as a black man. We've sacrificed a lot over this issue.
These that I think are very interesting. One is about the border fence that apparently is non-existent in South Africa. Then we're going to look at what Fikile has warned the South African Communist Party about. And then we're also going to look at what's happening to the National Colored Congress's leader. Let's get into it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Newsflash. I'm your host, Joe Emilio. Thanks for tuning in. So this is a developing story, and honestly, it's pretty wild. According to reports from ENCA and EWN, National Colored Congress leader and MP Fidel Adams was arrested at Parliamentary Village in Cape Town and is now being transported to KwaZulu-Natal. He's reportedly facing charges related to fraud and defeating the ends of justice. Now, at the moment, he has not been convicted of anything. These are allegations and the legal process still needs to play out. But politically, this is a massive headache for the NCC. Because when you build a political brand, being the outsider, the anti-establishment guy, the guy who says, trust me, instead of the corrupt politicians, then stories like this hit hard. And look, I'm just going to be honest. I never really trusted the guy. I don't know. Sometimes, sometimes when you walk into a room and you just meet someone and you feel off about them, they haven't done anything wrong to you. They haven't said anything wrong to you, but it's just like a vibe, right? Like your spider sense starts tingling, like something's off about this guy. That's how I felt about him and Gayton. Now, maybe he clears his name and maybe more details come out. We'll see. But nobody should be above the law, especially politicians. And politically, this raises a huge question. What happens to the NCC now? Because smaller parties are often built around personalities. If the personality collapses, the party can collapse with it. Only time will tell. Now, this one is fascinating. ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula has basically told ANC members who also belong to the South African Communist Party that they need to choose a side before the 2026 local government elections. Because for the first time in years, the South African Communist Party wants to contest in the elections independently instead of just backing the ANC.
It's about to go back.
And honestly, This is hilarious to watch. The Tripartite Alliance is supposed to be this united political supergroup. ANC, South African Communist Party, COSATU, they're supposed to be holding hands and singing revolutionary songs together. Now, suddenly, there's tension. Now, suddenly, it's choose a side. Who are you campaigning for? You can't serve two masters. This is political divorce court. Personally, I think the South African Communist Party is going to struggle badly in the elections. I don't think there's a massive communist voting bloc in South Africa. But maybe they think there's a gap in the market. The EFF has lost momentum. Julius Malema has legal pressure hanging over him. MK is eating into radical support. So maybe the South African Communist Party thinks this is their chance to grab whatever hardcore socialist vote still exists. But what's interesting here is the symbolism. The alliance is cracking. The ANC's support is weakening and its allies are becoming restless. Everybody is fighting for relevance. And honestly, after years of acting like one big revolutionary family, seeing them fight publicly is incredibly entertaining. Is this the beginning of the end of the Tripartite Alliance? And in today's final story from the Defense Web, it's honestly terrifying. According to the report, soldiers involved in border protection operations are complaining about a lack of proper fencing along South Africa's borders. Now here's the crazy part. Despite inadequate fencing, Operation Corona troops still managed to intercept thousands of illegal immigrants, millions of rands worth of narcotics, and contraband. And they also get wanted criminals, which basically tells you one thing. Imagine how much is getting through. This is exactly why border security matters. Open and poorly controlled borders don't just affect immigration. They affect crime, drug trafficking, smuggling, human trafficking, illegal weapons, syndicates, and national security as a whole. And let me be clear, I have no issue with legal immigration. If you follow the process, get documentation, come legally, work hard, contribute to the country, you're more than welcome to be in this country. But illegal immigration combined with weak border security creates chaos. And South Africa already struggles with gangsterism, organized crime, hijacked buildings, drug syndicates, and overwhelmed law enforcement. You cannot have a functional country if your borders are basically operating on vibes and prayers. And this again raises a bigger question heading into future elections. Politicians constantly talk about border security. They constantly promise action, but will anything actually change? At this point, I'm not holding my breath. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think about these stories? I'd really like to hear from you. Don't forget to go check out that Back a Buddy campaign linked in the description below and pinned comment, where I'm trying to raise funds in order to produce the next two documentaries, Stolen Ground 2 and 3, which will focus on investigating the land grabs that happened in Hermanus and Grabouw.
White South Africans are fleeing the country in search of a better life. And by the country, I mean America. They're fleeing America to come back to South Africa for a better life. Also, the handful of white South Africans who have been given refugee status in America have been completely abandoned by the American government. And it's rough for these refugees, languishing in cockroach-infested apartments, walking miles to the grocery store for food, and eating just one meal a day to save money. Why would Trump's America abandon the people who they claim to have saved from the worst plight imaginable, being white in South Africa? It's because that was all nonsense, propagandized nonsense from a political establishment that is using racism to placate its voters when it has not delivered its voters better quality of life and better prosperity. Because it was all a lie, obviously, trying to convince the world that white South Africans, the beneficiaries of apartheid and colonialism before that, hundreds of years of white economic empowerment and privilege, which has not been taken away at all in the new South Africa. Part of a dossier called The Perilous Reframing of Power, created by the Heinrich Böll Foundation, Cape Town. Go to their website to check out the rest of the dossier. It's really important.
Or if you think he will resign, because the Court has laid down the law in a judgment that will affect all future presidents of this country. So let's go back to the beginning with Phala Phala. So this is a scandal that occurred in February 2020. Well, we only found out about it 2 years later. But what occurred is that $580,000, that is the estimated amount, this is foreign currency, not declared, not gone through SARS, not in a bank account, was stuffed in the president's daughter's room at Pala Pala in couch cushions. And this money was stolen in February 2020. And instead of, calling the police, calling the Hawks, calling anyone, Cyril Ramaphosa allegedly called his private security to track down the thieves. The only reason that we know about this is because of Arthur Fraser. Arthur Fraser, ex-head of the spy network, the state security agency, whatever you want to call it. He's no angel himself. Well, he laid a criminal complaint against Cyril Ramaphosa in 2022. This is the only reason that we know about it. And after that complaint, according to Arthur Fraser, someone who we have gotten to know recently, Mswazi Msibi, the alleged Big Five CEO who is passed away, he's dead now, he wanted to kill Arthur Fraser and his advocate. The only way Arthur Fraser got out of this was that he went to go and visit Jacob Zuma, and Jacob Zuma called Mswazi Msibi and said, back down, and he did. Cannot make this up. The impeachment process was started against Cyril Ramaphosa. This is known as a Section 89 panel. Now, this panel was headed by 3 Chief Justices, the best legal minds in the country, and they found prima facie evidence of wrongdoing, of misconduct on Cyril Ramaphosa's part. And what happened is that the Section 89 report went before Parliament, and in 2022, the ANC still had no majority, and they said, nope, we are going to block it. We are not going to let this go into a full impeachment committee or a process. The EFF and the ATM, they weren't happy with this ruling, so they took it to the Con Court. And the Con Court has now ruled that basically that Section 89 rule that the Parliament has to vote on before it can go further, that is invalid. It is wrong. Parliament has to rewrite that rule because it's not constitutional. And what happens now is that impeachment goes ahead. That Section 89 report that found misconduct on Cyril Ramaphosa's part, well, that is back on the table, back from the dead. And that is got to go through a full impeachment process now. In future, no majority parties can save future presidents or leaders from impeachment, full impeachment processes after prima facie evidence of wrongdoing has been found in a Section 89 report. This is wow for our constitution. This means that there is some real accountability. No majority party can save a future leader from impeachment after prima facie evidence of misconduct has been found. Is never good.
The Constitutional Court has ruled that Parliament acted unlawfully when it blocked an investigation into the Pala Pala scandal in 2022. That changes everything. The court set aside Parliament's decision and ordered that the independent panel report be sent back to the impeachment committee. That report found Ramaphosa may have a case to answer over the theft of foreign currency from his Pala Pala farm in 2020. Parliament had previously voted against moving forward with a full investigation. Now that protection is gone, the case was brought by the EFF, and Julius Malema is already escalating the pressure. Malema says Ramaphosa will go to jail, and now the focus shifts back to Parliament, where the impeachment process could officially restart.
Accused of being anti-black somehow, because these laws are described as laws with the intention of empowering black people. And so if you're opposed to these laws, the accusation is that you are somehow opposed to black empowerment. Now, it's very important to understand that the term black empowerment in reference to these laws is a semantic fraud. In other words, it's simply not true that these laws empower black people. The term that is attached to these laws is a lie. Why? Firstly, because if you read the laws, it's very clear that they are aimed at encouraging and fostering state dependency. The South African government wants black people to be dependent on the state, either through social grants or through preferential treatment or through connections with the political elite as a prerequisite to doing business in South Africa. Because if they can do that, they can trap people in a never-ending cycle where they have no other choice than to keep voting for the ANC if they don't want to lose the benefits they get from the South African government. But other than that, it's well known that these policies only benefit a few politically connected people in South Africa. It has been found by researchers that billions, if not trillions, of South African rands only moved around benefiting about 100 politically connected families. While these laws have been implemented in South Africa, unemployment, and particularly black unemployment, has increased. Inequality has increased as a result of these laws. But just as important, there is significant pushback against these laws by the South African population as a whole. A recent study found that people who say that BBBEE policies, that's broad-based black economic empowerment policies, have gone too far is 54%. Those who say that hiring or promotion should be merit-based is 76%. And those who say that race categories do more harm than good is 67%. 2/3 of people in South Africa. Now, these are remarkable numbers considering the propaganda in favor of these laws that is pushed by the South African government in a never-ending fashion. Despite the fact that more than 50% of people in South Africa are already paid by the government, if you combine those who receive social grants with those who work for the government in some way or another. Lastly, it's important to state that these laws are not held intact by the South African government. The South African government does not have the capacity nor the competence to enforce these laws.
Now, when they claimed that they owned all the land, the original inhabitants, of whom there are not many left, said, excuse me, we were the original inhabitants, you guys were migrants here as well, which they were. Okay, the original inhabitants of southern Africa are called the Khoisan. In the west, the Bushmen are Khoisan. Hottentots are Khoisan. But you can't use those words anymore, you now have to call them Khoisan. Okay? Alright, now, and they were the inhabitants of the whole of southern Africa. So the whole of South Africa, at one stage, were Khoisan. The black people originated in what is now Cameroon. That's where they...
Hold on, Khoisan aren't black?
No.
What are they?
They're a completely separate ethnicity all on their own. In fact, if you look at them, they're kind of yellowy. They're a light brown yellow color, right. But they look more Asian than African. They do not consider themselves African.
Interesting.
When the white guys arrive in Cape Town, so 1652 is when Dutch guys arrived there. At that stage, you could have divided South Africa almost exactly 50-50, what's now South Africa. The western half of the country was entirely Khoisan. There were no black people there. None at all. Only Khoisan. So we're Cape Towners, all that area, Khoisan people. The northern part of the country did have black people. They'd started arriving, and they were still migrating.
How long had they been there in the northern?
Well, it's a moot point, and people have debated it. It would seem that black people had probably started arriving in the northern parts of South Africa, maybe 1,000 years, something like that, about 1,000 years before whites got there, right up in the north. Okay, and they've been slowly moving south because it's an empty space. I mean, one of the things about Africa is it's very empty. Up until the 1950s, Africa was very empty. It's the population exploded because white colonists, the naughty white colonists, put hospitals there, and there's been this huge population explosion since the 1950s. But Africa was really very empty up until then. And so tribes moved around and just occupied new empty territory. So the guys coming down from the north, who called the Bantus, it's called the Bantu expansions, when black people came out of the Cameroons. They'd been occupying South Africa and moving systematically south, down the east coast.
They were
of South
pastoralists, am I right?
Yeah, they were pastoralists, yeah. Whereas the Khoisan were hunter-gatherers. They were like aboriginals, okay, so they hadn't become pastoralists yet. The black guys are migrating down from the north and settling, doing exactly what white guys are doing. So white guys, the Dutch guys from Cape Town, were settling by moving eastwards. So the white guys are moving from Cape Town eastwards, and the black guys are moving down from the north. And they met at a place called the Fish River, which is now in the middle of South Africa, at a place called, it's still called Border. Everybody in South Africa calls that part of the country the border, even though there's no border there at all anymore. But it was a river called the Fish River, which is where blacks and whites first encountered each other. And then it started 100 years of warfare between whites and the Xhosa, who were the tribe that they met there. So, okay, so at that point, that would have been in about 1700. So whites and blacks first encountered each other in 1700.